Hello and welcome to episode 317 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Hello, Ian.
Hello, Jason. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I think spring might actually be here.
For real this time? So it's not going to be snowing in Chicago tomorrow or anything crazy like that?
I mean, who knows? But I think this might actually be spring. So I'm enjoying it.
Enjoy your 1 week before summer.
Yes, before it's 85 degrees and 200% humidity.
Yeah, that is actually next week. Next week.
There you go.
Looking forward to that already.
But things have been all over the place in the aviation industry. We've got lots of first quarter results coming out from companies, seeing the effects of, I think the word uncertainty has been mentioned in every single one of these quarterly reports. Also, the Federal Reserve's Beige Book is out, a macro survey of the general economic feeling of businesses and economists, and the mention of uncertainty is certainly highest I think it's ever been. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but there's also some good news this week, and we're going to talk about that as well. Let's dig into some of the top line numbers from Boeing, which released its first quarter financials today and had their call earlier today. They lost $31 million in the first quarter.
I mean, but in the grand scheme of things, you don't lose anything.
A lot less than they lost last quarter, which was $3.9 billion.
Yeah, you don't want to lose any money, but if you're losing money, it's better to lop an entire digit off that figure, I guess. It's not too bad.
I mean, many digits, really. So yeah, they lost $31 million in the first quarter of 2025, which was a dramatic reduction from the previous quarter, and also a pretty dramatic reduction, a tenfold decrease from the same quarter in the previous year, where they lost $355 million. So as Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg said today during the earnings reports, quote, "Our company is moving in the right direction as we start to see improved operational performance across our businesses." And the company, quote, "remains committed to making the fundamental changes needed to fully recover the company's performance while navigating the current environment." There's that buzzword, though we didn't get any uncertainty in that.
Did they use the word dynamic? Because a lot of companies are using the word dynamic, which could really mean anything. Yeah, but Boeing did reiterate that it does plan on gradually increasing the 737 production rate to get to 38 per month this year. And also the 787 program, they're stabilizing that at 5 per month and still hopes to get that up to 7 aircraft per month by the end of this year. Boeing has not been particularly successful on increasing production rate without either having to ratchet it back down or simply not reaching that target. Still, I don't think there's been any commentary on the second 737 line up in Everett. Who knows when that's going to happen, but things are trending, dare I say, in the right direction.
Well, they did say, so 38, remember, 38 is the number that the FAA has capped Boeing at as far as how many 737s they can build per month. To go higher than that, they need to request permission from the FAA. And Ortberg said that they do plan on asking the FAA to increase that monthly cap up to 42 later this year. So that seems to be trending in the right direction.
Okay, good news.
Yeah, good news. Boeing also talked about how the tariffs are impacting the company. They are paying a 10% tariff on parts that are coming in from Italy and Japan. Those increased prices, Boeing says, will be passed on through exports. So they hope to basically keep the same amount of revenue versus cost because they're going to be able to pass those increased costs on as increased prices through exports. U.S. airlines, on the other hand, not too happy to hear about that, or happy to hear about that, I guess I should say. What else was good news for Boeing?
Good news.
Generally upbeat on deliveries. 130 aircraft delivered in the first quarter this year. That is up from 83 deliveries in the same quarter for last year. So trending in the right direction, it seems, financially, operationally, and culturally. It seems that Boeing has done some listening. A employee survey in which 82% of employees participated told Boeing that the employees just basically said, "Hey, management, we don't trust you and we're not feeling great," which I don't think is a huge surprise.
No, not a surprise to anyone. But in reaction to all of that, Ortberg shared 5 new company values that they plan to adopt. And this is not, I mean, a lot of this is corporate speak, but this is not something unique to Boeing or anything here. But the 5 company values that Boeing has picked is safety and quality, people focus, trust, ownership, and innovation. Okay, if that's in order, I guess that's the right order as well. Maybe I'd swap around people, focus, and trust, because without trust, you can't focus on your people. But seems to be good, especially the back and forth over the one on ownership, where apparently the tagline for that one includes the quote, "give a damn!" exclamation point. Yeah. When I pointed out that, like, hey, I like that, because nothing good happens if people don't give a damn. If you don't believe in what you do, if you don't believe in the company, if you don't put effort into it, the company is going to rot and it's going to be bad. And you're going to end up with Boeing circa 2022 or 2019, whatever. There is some question of, well, it really depends on what you're giving a damn about. If you're giving a damn about financials and share buybacks and only investors, yeah, that's a problem. But this is more of, what are the company values from an employee point of view? So if it is that every employee needs to give a damn, well, your guys on and whomever else on the 737 assembly line, they probably don't care so much about share buybacks. So if they give a damn about doing a good job and sending out airplanes that have all the bits and pieces attached, that's probably a good improvement.
Yeah, I mean, some of the results in the survey were, I think, not shocking, but the numbers offer some real clarity. This survey was the first survey of Boeing employees since 2019, and it found that 67% of the employees who responded reported feeling proud to work at Boeing. That was down from 91% in a 2013 survey. Only 27% of staff would highly recommend Boeing as a place to work. And 42% said they had confidence in senior leaders' ability to make decisions, communicate direction, and respond to concerns raised by employees. So less than half had confidence in the folks leading the company. I mean, those are some real stark numbers. So I think that is hopefully some stark relief for Boeing leaders. And it seems like they're taking this to heart. And the new values, and Jason, you mentioned that, corporate speak. Yeah, it's going to be corporate speak because Boeing is a giant corporation. But if they can put these values into action and reinvigorate what being a part of Boeing means, then I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, the proof will be in the pudding. They actually got to put in the work. You can't just slap these, whatever you want to call them, company slogans or company beliefs on the wall and then not do anything with them. You actually have to live these things. So hopefully we do actually get to that point and it's not just, people focused and then on to the next thing. But not all is well at Boeing, because nothing is ever going to be all well at Boeing. Nothing can ever be going that well because it's too large a company for everything to just be fine. We talked about this a bit already, about the tariffs and how Boeing is paying for some of the parts, because remember, Boeing is a global company. It cannot make its aircraft without sourcing parts from international entities. However, China, as we talked about last week, basically stomped on the brakes for all deliveries of Boeing aircraft and I guess really US-based parts. And now we have seen 2 737 aircraft already flying all the way back home to the US to be potentially remarketed elsewhere.
These were 737 MAX aircraft that were destined for Chinese airlines that had flown from Seattle to Boeing's completion center in China for final work before delivery. They had not yet been delivered, and they are now back in the US. I believe there's a third 737 MAX that is due to make the trip back as well. The kind of elsewhere in China, China Southern had been trying to divest itself of its 787-8 fleet. They are trying to sell all 10 of them. I put in a tender offer. It was immediately rejected.
Air could use some new aircraft. Yeah.
It was immediately rejected. And I guess they didn't want my money, but that's neither here nor there. However, they are now temporarily suspending that potential sale because of
they're going to need them.
Uncertainty and what's happening. The company says that they were suspending the sales, quote, in view of the existence of matters affecting property rights transactions.
Oh, that's a lot of words. These are not new aircraft by any means. The average age of China Southern's 788 fleet is, I think, almost 12 years old. So these have been around a while. And airlines aren't exactly thrilled with the 787-8. It's kind of the misfit of the family. They have far more. I think they have 19 -9s. So kind of like what we saw with Norwegian transferring to Norse, like they had no interest in those -8s because Ian, you're not a big fan of the -8, are you?
Anyone who's listened to, I think, more than 3 or 4 episodes of the podcast will know that I do not like the 787-8 for a variety of reasons.
And you tried to buy them from China Southern. Look at you. Hypocrite.
Just because I don't personally like the plane doesn't mean it's not a great fit for Pechmo Air. But it's just the oddball for all sorts of operational reasons, for all sorts of aesthetic reasons. It's just the oddball 787. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely love the 787-9. It is the perfectly proportioned airplane. The -8's it's just wrong.
Well, at least China Southern had a very nice livery on these -8s with the not just the Euro white on the fuselage. They had that nice blue kind of feathery swooshy thing going on and big 787 titles up front. Because remember, these are some of the older 787s out there. So it was still cool to tout that
this is a 787.
787s. It was a cool thing to show that, hey, these are 787s. And they definitely did just that. I think their oldest one is line number like 34. So these are pretty old aircraft in the grand scheme of 787s. But yeah, they might hold on to those for a fair bit longer, huh?
So the suspension runs through the middle of May, and then I think they're going to try and retender them. So maybe I still have a shot. I don't know.
You never know.
You never know. Let's round out our discussion of Boeing this week. This isn't really part of the earnings call that was today, but this news came out yesterday on the 22nd of April, where Boeing announced the agreement to sell a collection of digital businesses to a private equity firm. Thoma Bravo will purchase Boeing's digital aviation solutions businesses, including Jeppesen and ForeFlight. So Jeppesen is the charting company that has been around for decades and decades.
1934, 91 years.
So if you're using approach charts, airport charts, things like that, that's all Jeppesen. And they do much more than that. ForeFlight is, of course, the digital pilot all-in-one electronic flight bag is, I think, underselling it, but extremely popular with general aviation pilots, used by military pilots. And that was purchased by Boeing, I believe, in 2019.
You are correct.
Not been part of the family for very long, but this has been, I don't want to say on the chopping block, but Boeing has been looking to kind of divest themselves of these types of businesses for about a year now. There's been talk. And there was some speculation that somebody like RTX or another kind of aviation-centric large contractor would pick these up. Thoma Bravo is a private equity firm that deals with a lot of software, but they do not have necessarily a strong aviation background.
No. I'm cautioning myself getting too out of my wheelhouse. But
yeah.
But if you are a Jeppesen or ForeFlight user, this should scare the crap out of you. Nothing good happens in the hands of a private equity firm. Literally nothing in the history of a company being acquired by a private equity firm has ever resulted in something positive happening. So if you are a GA pilot tooling around for fun using ForeFlight, or if you are a massive global airline using Jeppesen for your charts and your electronic flight bag, this should scare the crap out of you because a private equity firm is in it for nothing but the profit. So the term for private equity firms and what happens to stuff that they buy is, and what happens is they're not in this to improve it. Most likely. Prove me wrong. Hopefully that is not the case, not what happens here. But private equity firms are typically the grim reaper for private companies or public companies that get bought out by private equity. I would not be happy if I were an airline that relied heavily on my operation for this, because I can't imagine they'll have the resources or the commitment to it that an entity like Boeing did.
The best thing that could happen is nothing.
Exactly. If nothing happens, that's fine. But that's not typically how this goes.
Well, we shall wait and see. Let's head south and talk about Embraer, which has an optimistic outlook.
Hey, good times down in Brazil.
Like, very optimistic outlook. Very large and growing backlog, both in terms of the E175 original, because American Airlines, both airlines in America and American Airlines, the company, are continuing to order those, thanks Scope Clause. And then the E2 backlog continues to grow with Brazil's Azul, Porter Airlines up in Canada, and some lessors, including AerCap, taking a bunch of those. So you've got airlines around the world looking for E2s, E195s and E190 E2s. And Embraer says, hey, we're doing okay. Delivery performance was not super great because of supply chain issues
in the first quarter, which is apparently 20% higher than the first quarter of 2024 when they only delivered 25. So they're actually managing to churn out more aircraft than they did the year before, which these days, that's something to sneeze at.
So that will hopefully grow over the course of the year. And then we'll see where they go. But they seem upbeat, so we'll go with the good news for Embraer.
Yeah, good for them. Just slow and steady. It must be nice to be a company of this size who can just keep churning out a 20-plus-year-old product and just keep going and keep selling and not really even have to worry about replacing it because you don't have to do anything. All you have to do is
let us know when you need some more.
Building and supporting your existing 20-year-old thing, and the buyers will keep coming.
Yeah. Airbus not so happy with the A220 these days. The aircraft itself still doing quite well. However, building and delivering those aircraft, not great. And not many people are ordering them.
Yeah, the A220, we've talked about this a number of times, is kind of the runt of the Airbus family. Not surprising. It's not actually an Airbus-developed aircraft. It is Bombardier's aircraft, now rebranded as Airbus. So, of course, it's not going to be the aircraft in the spotlight. But Airbus is very focused on stabilizing the A320 production line and the A320 supply chain, and also fixing all those engine issues from Pratt & Whitney for specifically the A320. So the A220 is kind of a runner-up here. Like, it's getting some attention, but not a ton. Definitely not going to see a stretch anytime soon of this aircraft until it's stabilized or there's some more orders. But Airbus is in it for the long haul, but you don't see many orders for the A220 these days, do you?
No. I mean, I guess, symbolic orders in the last year or so, but just the program has been under such strain. I mean, between the actual building and delivering the aircraft, and then once the aircraft are delivered, keeping them in service because of the engines has just been such a
hassle.
A
hassle. And on top of that, Airbus now has to take in-house the Spirit Aerosystems division that made A220 components, which, according to this Aviation Week article that we'll link to, is a really big problem because, quote, they are horribly loss-making. And up until now, that was Spirit Aerosystems' problem. But now it becomes an Airbus problem, and it starts to become real because those losses are now Airbus's problem. So
it's funny, they're Airbus's problem now because they were Spirit's problem before. Spirit becomes Airbus's problem because Spirit is Boeing's problem.
There's just problems everywhere. It's almost
like this is a very small industry.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about billions and billions of dollars between the decisions of a handful of people, which is, I think, worth remembering sometimes.
Yeah, maybe we go back so long ago to when Airbus referred to the C series way back when as a cute little aircraft. And what a different reality we would be in if Airbus didn't have to basically purchase out the C series family or ended up buying it for a symbolic dollar. What's old is new again, since tariffs
it just keeps coming around.
Tariffs put this aircraft where it is now, and tariffs are, again, making it even more difficult to sell this aircraft. Everything that's old is new again.
There you go. Let's head southwest. With Southwest Airlines reporting its first quarter earnings this week as well. Southwest Airlines lost $149 million in the first quarter. However, that's less than it lost last quarter.
Hey, so that's the good news.
There's the good news.
The bad news is that they lost $149 million on record revenue of $6.4 billion. So that there's something quite wrong in the House of Southwest, where if you are losing
and
that much on
all-time record yields.
Yeah, not good. So they are taking in more money than they have ever taken in, but they are still losing $149 million on the quarter, which is not great. Things are moving along in the way of reshaping Southwest. So basic economy and bag fees are expected to launch next month, while assigned and extra legroom seats go on sale in the third quarter for actual operation in the first quarter of next year. Oh, and as everyone is doing, is so popular these days, capacity is being cut due to, quote, dynamic, there's the dynamic word, economic environment. Overall, though, capacity is up, I think, 1% on the full year, even after the cuts for Southwest, because of they're operating red-eye flights, which they didn't do last year. Also, they have cut turn times at 19 airports and counting, so making airplanes fly more and making them fly overnight, since they're capable of flying at night. And it turns out so is Southwest now, but only a little bit.
Planes can work in the dark. Who knew?
They can. Some airplanes can only work in the dark. Like if you're 757 in Europe, you can only operate when the sun goes down.
That's true.
That's true. It's a little known, but it's true.
Jason's referring to, I think it was early this week, late last week, you threw up a filter on 757s and it was nighttime in Europe, and that's the only time they come out there.
The only time you'll see them.
The vampire airplane?
They are the vampire airplane, because in Europe, you pretty much only see a 757 operating when the sun goes down, because they're all freight aircraft at this point. I don't think there are any passenger 75s left in Europe, right?
I mean, Iceland.
Except for Iceland Air, but that's different. They're over there. And even those are on their way out.
We're going to get angry emails.
That's okay. Moving on. I'm going to move on. Southwest is not the only airline, at least in the U.S., losing money. As just a minute ago, we see Alaska Airlines also reported an adjusted $95 million net loss on 197 operating loss in quarter one. But they say bookings for the second quarter have stabilized, but their outlook includes recent, quote, softness. Oh, there's a new word we haven't used yet today. So things not good. Not good.
I'm making a list of all the euphemism words that we're seeing. Soft, dynamic, uncertain.
Got to be more.
We'll keep it going. Let's head over to the engine side of things, where CFM is saying that things are
still
great.
Broken. What do you want from us?
Yes, things are still broken. LEAP engine deliveries were down 13% year over year, with the first quarter of 2025 seeing delivery of 319 engines amongst a host of continuing supply chain issues. However, they are trying to make those up by the end of the year, with shipments rising 15 to 20%. So they've got a way to go then if they want to come out ahead that far by the end of the year. They shipped 367 engines in the first quarter of 2024.
Could be better.
It could be better. So on the good news side of things, all of the LEAP 1As that are being shipped for the A320neo family have the life extension kit as kind of the factory package. So those are going to be especially good for A320neo family aircraft that are operating in those hot and dusty regions. So that'll be good to see. The similar package for the Leap 1Bs, which power the 737 MAX, is also in progress. So that's moving in the right direction. We'll see how that goes. Where else can we go? We'll go to GE Aerospace and RTX discussing tariffs as well, saying that GE is going to take a $500 million hit this year from tariffs. However, they do intend to impose tariff surcharges on customers, which will lessen the total number and bring them down to 500 million. However, they say they are still going to be able to meet their financial guidance. So that's impressive to my mind, that you can take a $500 million hit and still meet your financial guidance. So I'll be interested to see how that's going to happen. And RTX says that they will possibly see a potential impact of $850 million from increased costs due to tariffs. And we have a quote from RTX CEO Chris Callio, quote, "The situation remains fluid and it's difficult to assess the impact." I'm adding fluid to our list.
Fluid. That's a good one. So we've got fluid, dynamic. What were the other ones? Are we writing these down? Or
soft.
Are we
Yeah,
soft.
I'm writing them down.
Soft,
dynamic, uncertainty, and fluid.
Oh, okay. Maybe we'll get another couple by the end of the episode.
Yes. So breaking that down, RTX actually breaks down where the tariffs are impacting its businesses. So RTX is the massive defense and aerospace contractor that owns, among other things, Collins Aerospace and Pratt & Whitney. So they say $250 million of the $850 will be because of tariffs on Canada and Mexico. $250 million will be on China-related tariffs, and then $300 million to just other countries, and then $50 million specifically for the US's new aluminum and steel import tariffs. So an interesting breakdown from RTX on where they're seeing the biggest hit. But all that said, their businesses are doing quite well. RTX saw a good quarter, especially Collins, which was up 28% year on year, and Pratt & Whitney turned a $580 million profit, which is up 41%.
Hey, that's great. That's enough financials. Financials are confusing. They're very complex. There's a lot of stuff, numbers and letters being thrown all over. You know what? Let's talk about something streamlined and simple and not at all confusing.
No.
Notams.
Oh, yeah, notams. Fundamentally, the most understandable and clear set of ideas one could think of.
Easily accessible, too.
Yes.
Definitely a modernized thing, no problem. You don't have to sort through 50 pages telling you about birds 60 miles from the airport. Well, good news. The FAA has, quote, expedited a replacement for the NOTAM system. There's some good stuff to break down here.
There is some good stuff to break down, but I want to note very clearly.
I know where you're going with this. It is not a replacement of, I guess, the core function of NOTAMs. We are not fixing the problem.
Yeah, we're not fixing NOTAMs.
We are fixing how you access the junk that is currently there. What is the quote from Office Space? We're not. Oh, I'm losing it.
It's still going to be garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah, something like that.
The garbage will come in faster and more reliably, and the garbage will come out faster, more reliably, and in a text and geographical format.
It will be cloud-based because what could go wrong? It'll be fine. But the FAA, this is something that does need to be done, and it's something that has been planned for a long time. But the FAA put out a release saying they are accelerating the modernization of a critical safety system that alerts pilots and flight planners about airspace changes. And it's time, again, quote, "It is time our technology enters the 21st century. And NOTAM modernization is the first step as we work to deliver an all-new air traffic control system that makes air travel safer and more efficient." But I guess at the end of this, it's just going to be, like you said, Ian, seeing the same junk that's there, just more reliably, hopefully. They do note that there were major NOTAM system outages dating back to January 2023, and they've mitigated that a bit with some backup systems that they can put into place if the main system does go out of service. But apparently they have selected a company called CGI to modernize it and have it in service by July 2025 with a deployment and operational readiness date of September 2025. But Ian, you pointed out that there's something fishy about those dates, isn't there?
Well, it's not so much that it's fishy. It's the fact that those are just the original dates.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it is fishy that they're calling accelerated, but then they're just matching the dates that they've already set forth.
I think what didn't happen is they never announced that it was never going to happen on time.
Yes.
I think everyone knew that because that's just how these things work.
If they hadn't selected a vendor to do this.
You don't need it.
Yeah. If they hadn't selected a vendor to do this until now, there was no way this was ever going to happen. So yeah, it's late April already, and to have something in place and delivered by July and in service by September, that is an extremely accelerated timeframe to do anything.
This is what gives me great pause for concern, because the NOTAM system is, for all of our talk about how terrible it is, and yes, it is absolutely terrible. It is also critical.
Mission critical.
You cannot launch flights without the NOTAM system.
No.
And an accelerated time frame like this scares the bejesus out of me. Because it is April 23rd. That gives them May and June and however much of July. Let's say it gives them all of July, because when they say deliver it by July, we'll say they give them the last day of July. So that gives them roughly 3 months and a week to understand the requirements of the system, figure out how to do it, test it, and deliver it.
Yikes. Just thinking about this is making me sweaty, because it actually kind of mirrors the timeline for a project I have at work, where I need to have something done by July and a final thing done by September, October. And that's just like this little thing, and that's giving me angst. But to know that some private company is going to come in and totally detangle something as tangled as the NOTAM system in just a couple of months, that's, I don't know about that.
So here's what we don't know. And this is why I'm not completely jittery about this. We don't know how much work has already been done.
Yes.
So it could be the fact that there was a contractor working on this, they've done most of the work, and now there's just some implementation work to accomplish. Maybe that's the case. And from April to July, they just need to, basically plug it in and test it, I hope. So hopefully this is in fact them saying, okay, we're going to work hard. We're going to do this faster than it was going, because this is critical. It needs to get done, and we need to make sure that this happens so that we can do other things that we want to do to modernize our airspace.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Accelerating stuff like this, I don't think anyone would say the FAA has been particularly prompt in overhauling its technology. So if this administration wants to come in and more efficiently roll things out, go for it. But my recommendation would be, whatever the cutover date to the new NOTAM system ends up being, you probably don't want to fly that day. Let's just say, I can't imagine it being completely seamless. Even in the best case scenario, things are going to be weird.
Things invariably happen. So
maybe sit this one out.
If you solid advice, keep an eye on that date. Yeah. Okay, let's go to Orlando and talk about the Delta A330 that did its best impression of the Delta 717 fuselage that they've turned into a barbecue.
Oh, yeah. The engine number 2 on the right side of the aircraft caught fire as it was operating as Delta 1213 from Orlando to Atlanta. You may think that's a little weird that an A330 was operating Orlando to Atlanta, but it happens all the time. It's a very high capacity route. I think it operates like a dozen times a day. It's one of those endless capacity routes. It was a legit fire. If you've probably seen the video.
This was not like a compressor stall. This was engine do something bad, engine, and some of the plane catch on fire.
Yes, this was one of the more legit fires you will see. Not quite like British Airways in Las Vegas. That was crispy aircraft. But this was a legitimate fire. And the evacuation, let's say, did not go seamless. So the flight attendants, the crew on board, they popped 2 exit doors on the left side of the aircraft, one fully inflated, and the L4 door towards the back of the aircraft, well, that slide didn't fully inflate and was not usable. And towards the end of the evacuation, the L3 door, that slide just kind of went limp. Not sure what the circumstances are behind that one, if that was after the evacuation or if the wind blew it or what happened. But I would say that this aircraft, it was extremely unlikely if they were ever going to be able to evacuate in the 90 allowable seconds with half the exits usable. Interestingly, they don't seem to have ever opened the L1 door. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I noticed that. I don't know why either.
But at some point, the fire crews at Orlando, they were able to get an air stairs, the ARF air stairs up to the rear left door of the aircraft, and people were able to just walk off the airplane, which is a lot safer than going down the slide, where most injuries do occur. But thankfully, there are no reports of injuries on this aircraft, except for the A330, which is Delta's going to need to put some work into that particular aircraft.
It'll be back in service in no time. It's Delta.
No time at all. Unfortunately, didn't happen at Atlanta, happened at an outstation at Orlando. So they're going to have to fly some of their magical elves down there and put this thing back into service in a couple extra minutes it's going to take them.
Just tow it back up to Atlanta.
Yeah, they can do that.
They could. Let's finish what we've got in the rundown, and we'll go to Istanbul, where last week, Istanbul Airport became the third airport in the world and the first in Europe to conduct triple parallel takeoffs. So Istanbul Airport has a goal to serve 200 million passengers per year. And the only way to do that is to offer more flights. And the only way to offer more flights is to have more capacity. And so they said, okay, you know what? We can land 3. Why not take off 3? Which is harder than it sounds, because there are a lot of special procedures that go into place for both the flight crews and especially the air traffic controllers. So after all of that work, they finally began the triple parallel takeoffs last week. And they are continuing on their way in Istanbul to try and take away from other major transit hubs, especially in the Middle East. So think Dubai, Doha, Abu Dhabi, where those airlines have made it their business to move folks through their hubs. Istanbul and Turkish Airlines says we can do that too, because we have this giant new airport. And so this is just another step in that direction.
Yeah, it looks pretty cool too if you do the playback where the aircraft on the far left runway turns right, the one on the far right turns right, and the one in the middle just keeps on flying in a straight line. Takes some good coordination, but it looks pretty sweet when you do the playback. The far right runway, I don't know the numbers offhand, but it's a bit offset from the other two and way on the other side of the terminal complex. So there's a good bit of separation between the runways here. But what other airports have a triple departure like this? I know it's the only one in Europe, but are there any others in the world that do this kind of thing?
There are others in the world. I think that's a really good quiz question.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I didn't put it in the show notes. So I think we're going to leave that one up to listeners. What are the other 2 triple parallel departure airports? Because there are many, many, many airports around the world that have triple parallel landings.
Arrivals, yeah, that's a different story. But departures.
But what are the other 2 that have triple parallel departures? Drop us a note at podcast@fr24.com. If anybody gets the right answer, there might be a little something in it for you.
Nice.
Fly a deal, Jason. A low-cost carrier that needs some wide-body capacity. How about 10 A330 NEOs? What do you say?
Yes, transferred over from everyone's favorite undisclosed airlines. I had no idea Fly a Deal was looking to expand into wide-body long-haul operations. It is a subsidiary of the Saudia Group, so I guess not all that surprising. Saudi has got a lot of backing behind it, so it knows how to operate long-haul flights, but I did not know they were looking to expand the low-cost unit of the Saudia Group to long-haul. So Saudi has got there's a lot going on in the Saudi Arabian aviation market right now, between the imminent rolling out of Riyadh Air and also at the very other end of the spectrum, Fly a Deal. So you have an ultra premium airline launching in the same country where we see an ultra low cost airline going into long haul. So very busy country right now.
I mean, we can skip right down to Riyadh, which has begun proving flights. So that's exciting. And they unveiled what their cabin is going to look like this week in a, do we call it 4-class configuration? 3.5 class? How do we?
3.5 class is all the rage now. It's economy, premium economy, business, and business plus, which is just your bulkhead front of cabin. It's got a bit of extra wiggle room seat. So not quite 4 cabin, 3.5. Until they have an actual first class cabin, then it's 4.5 cabins.
4.5. Yeah, there you go. They also have the first aircraft painted in, I guess, what's going to be the standard Riyadh Air livery. Not the super purpley one, but where the front half of the fuselage is white with the giant billboard titles. And then you have that lilac and purple in the rear of the fuselage. They've done a very, I think, nice job with the Zorro mask on the 787. They've got the kind of, it comes to a point near the door, and I haven't seen it head on. We have just one photo on the jet photos that has a view of that, but I like how they've done that. It's not just kind of a rounded nest. They've given it a little bit of flair.
Yeah, it's nice. Oh, geez, I just got another text message that, hey, why not toss this PSA in? Hey, real ID enforcement begins on May 7th at TSA checkpoints at an airport near you. It won't stop. It won't stop. So I figure why not bring that to everyone else? It won't stop. For some background, if you don't follow me on
did we talk about this?
Shout out to that. I don't think we have. I have signed up for SMS and email alerts from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, the operator entity of the New York airports, because I want to know when the air train doesn't work, and I want to know when something else is wrong at the airports, because there's no other way really to proactively know. And typically it's, the Newark air train's broken, or the Newark air train's going to be offline this weekend, because of course it is. But they have been sending out the same message that says real ID enforcement begins 5/7 at TSA checkpoints. More info at tsa.gov. 3 times a day, every day, all week. And I'm starting to lose my mind a little bit. The time to include all of you. If you don't have a real ID, May 7th is coming up. We talked about it last week where, hey, maybe it's going to be delayed again, and people want it to be delayed, but we're getting dangerously close to that date.
If it does go into force, we'll talk about how that impacts the airports. Where are we going next? How about Australia?
Okay, we're going down under.
If the pay is right.
If the pay is right, unconfirmed reports say from Reddit that 9 air traffic controllers at the Albuquerque FAA Center have resigned to accept positions at Air Services Australia, the government-owned ATC organization. And typically, I would say we don't really cover things that are not yet confirmed, but we see it on AvWeb, which is confirming reports on Reddit that air traffic controllers are just getting up and quitting and leaving because there's better pay and better stability elsewhere. That's a big part of it. That we know the FAA has been understaffed forever. Really, all air traffic control entities everywhere have been understaffed for a long time, but things are not great at the FAA, especially when you get random emails on a Monday morning say, hey, do you want to resign? We'll give you some money if you leave. So very weird time. But if this is actually true that 9 air traffic controllers at one control center have put in their resignation letters, that's going to get really bad really quick in that airspace.
That'll be interesting to see how widespread that becomes.
Yeah, air traffic controller
or if they
poaching.
go, Albuquerque seems kind of like Australia. Let's recruit them.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Hey, congratulations to Thailand, which has regained FAA Category 1, its FAA Category 1 safety rating, which means it can expand service and launch new service in the US. So I'll take it.
Yeah, this was a long time coming. It was knocked down to Category 2, it being Thailand, in 2015. So a very long time. And we thought the knocking down of Mexico to Category 2 lasted a long time. This was a lot longer. So this means, presumably, Thai Airways will be able to launch nonstop flights to the U.S. once again, and it will be able to ink co-shares and other sorts of fun agreements with U.S. airlines that it has not been able to do since 2015, a full decade. That's crazy. Hey, That's exciting. Thailand's a very popular destination right now, so I wouldn't expect it to take very long for them to at least try to get a nonstop flight to the U.S.
I want to say every other week or so, another airline is adding service to Bangkok. So it's certainly popular in many locations. So now that they have access to the US, I think that's going to be a very good thing for them. Let's end the show with a bit of a fun thing. We've talked about undisclosed airlines and all of that good fun stuff. Oh, how many times, I don't know. That it's become enough of a joke that an undisclosed podcast listener went and did something very nice for us.
Wait, this wasn't you?
No.
You told me about this, but I just assumed it was you.
No, this was not me. This was a very nice podcast listener who went out and did this. So if you're listening to the show and you're thinking to yourself, what can I do? You can go to undisclosedairlines.com is what you can do. So we're going to have to figure out something fun to do with this now that we have access to this. But thank you to the undisclosed listener who has gone out and purchased that domain.
That's
and on
hilarious.
That note, this has been episode 317 of AvTalk. I am Ian Petchnick, here as always with
Jason Rabinowitz. Thanks for listening.